The first warning came not with a bang, but with a whisper of quantum distortion that rippled across Earth's defensive networks. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing quantum entanglement data when the first anomaly appeared, a millisecond of impossible mathematics that made her blood run cold. "No," she breathed, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "This isn't a simulation." 12 massive Archean dreadnoughts materialized above Earth's atmosphere, their crystalline hulls absorbing and refracting light in ways that defied human understanding. Each ship was a city-sized weapon of incomprehensible technological sophistication, smooth, angular structures that looked more like living crystals than manufactured vessels. The global defense systems never stood a chance. In the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, military researchers watched in horror as their most advanced tracking systems became nothing more than useless streams of garbled data. Quantum communication networks collapsed. Satellite arrays went dark. The world's most sophisticated defense grid disintegrated like tissue paper against a hurricane. Sarah's team had precisely 17 minutes from first detection to total planetary defense failure. The first plasma strikes hit major metropolitan centers with surgical precision. New York vanished in a blue-white nuclear-like explosion that vaporized everything within a 50-mile radius. Tokyo's iconic skyline disappeared in less than 3 seconds. London became a crater of molten glass and quantum-charged plasma. Billions died in the initial strike. What the Archons didn't understand was the nature of human survival. Each death wasn't just a loss, it was a data point. Each destroyed city was a lesson. Each fallen defender became a story of resistance waiting to be told. In the burning remnants of San Francisco, Sarah watched her entire research team disintegrate. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, her mentor, her friend, was mid-sentence when a quantum lance struck their underground research facility. One moment he was explaining a breakthrough in quantum communication. The next he was gone. Something fundamental shifted in Sarah in that moment. Not just grief, not just anger, but a cold, calculating fury that would reshape the entire concept of human resistance. The Archons broadcast their invasion globally, believing it would crush human spirit. They wanted the world to watch their total, absolute victory. They wanted to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Instead, they provided humanity with its most potent weapon: documentation of their own brutality. Every moment was recorded, every strike, every destruction. The invasion became humanity's recruitment video. In underground bunkers, in hidden server farms, in remote military installations, survivors began to organize. Not with panic, not with fear, but with a precision that would make the Archons understand the true meaning of a species pushed to its absolute limit. Sarah Chen's fingers moved across her last remaining interface. Around her, the underground server farm hummed with potential. Scattered survivors were already sending fragments of Archean technology, communication logs, weapon signatures. The first counterattack would not be with conventional weapons. It would be with something far more dangerous. Pure, weaponized human creativity. The Archons believed they were conducting a routine planetary acquisition. They treated humans like insects to be cataloged and controlled. They were about to learn the most important lesson in galactic history. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. They were a force of nature waiting to be unleashed. The resistance didn't begin in military bunkers or government command centers. It started in the most unexpected places: refugee camps, underground networks, and the fractured remnants of human infrastructure. Colonel Jack Harker understood something the Archons would never comprehend. True resistance was about people, not just technology. He stood in a makeshift command center beneath the ruins of what was once Denver, studying a holographic map dotted with survivor clusters. Each point represented more than just a location. It was a potential weapon, a node of human resilience. "We're not building an army," Harker told the assembled survivors. "We're building a living, breathing computational network that happens to be made of humans." The team he assembled was nothing short of extraordinary. Each member selected not for traditional military credentials, but for their capacity to transform limitation into opportunity. Maria Rodriguez looked like she could blend into any crowd, a skill honed during her years navigating cartel communication networks in South America. Her dark eyes missed nothing, her mind constantly calculating probabilities most people couldn't even conceptualize. Before the invasion, she'd been a communications expert who could hack any network. Now she was humanity's ghost in the machine. Derek Wong sat in the corner, surrounded by a chaos of salvaged electronics. Once an MIT dropout who'd been told he was too unconventional, he now proved that genius rarely follows traditional paths. He could build weapons from microwave parts, turn consumer drones into strategic reconnaissance units, and reprogram captured Archon technology faster than their original designers could understand it. Amir Khan was different, a psychological warfare specialist who understood that the most devastating weapons were often invisible. He'd spent years studying communication, manipulation, and the intricate ways human psychology could be both a shield and a weapon. "The Archons think they've won," Amir said, his voice calm and methodical. "They believe they've crushed our infrastructure, eliminated our leadership. They don't understand that for humans, destruction is just another form of opportunity." Their first mission was audacious: infiltrate and sabotage an Archon communication relay stationed in what was once the Nevada desert. But this wasn't a traditional military operation. It was psychological warfare taken to its absolute extreme. Harker outlined the plan. It wasn't about destroying the relay. It was about making the Archons question their entire understanding of human capability. Maria had already mapped the relay's quantum communication patterns. Derek had developed modifications to their infiltration equipment that would make standard Archon detection systems completely useless. Amir was preparing psychological triggers that would introduce maximum cognitive dissonance into their communication networks. "We're not just going to break their systems," Derek explained, showing a modified device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and an alien quantum processor. "We're going to make them question the fundamental nature of their technological superiority." The device was a masterpiece of improvised engineering. Part quantum disruptor, part psychological warfare tool, it would inject computational chaos directly into the Archon's most secure communication channels. As night fell over the destroyed landscape, the team prepared. This wasn't just a mission. It was humanity's first true counterattack in a war that would determine the species' survival. Colonel Harker looked at his team, a quantum physicist, a communication expert, a technological improviser, and a psychological warfare specialist. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were humanity's first line of computational defense, and they were ready to show the galaxy exactly what humans could do when pushed to the absolute limit. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source: human emotion. Dr. Sarah Chen's fingers moved like lightning across a cobbled-together quantum interface, her mind pushing beyond the boundaries of conventional computational thinking. The Archon's technological superiority was built on a fundamental misconception that all communication could be predicted, controlled, and quantified. They were wrong. Humans communicated in ways that defied mathematical prediction. Metaphor, emotional nuance, contextual complexity that transformed simple data into living, breathing information. The Chimera Protocol was born in the heart of a makeshift research facility buried beneath the ruins of San Francisco. What started as a way to understand Archon communication networks became something far more dangerous: a computational virus that was part code, part psychological weapon. "It's not just about breaking their systems," Sarah explained to the small team of survivors and researchers gathered around her. "It's about introducing something they can't comprehend: unpredictability." Each line of code carried multiple potential meanings: mathematical equations that twisted into poetry, technical specifications that contained emotional subtext, communication that was simultaneously a weapon, a message, and a work of art. When Derek Wong first saw the initial prototype, he let out a low whistle. "This isn't just a computer virus," he said. "This is a weaponized nervous system." The first test was small but devastating. They intercepted a low-level Archean communication relay, a routine transmission about resource allocation. The Chimera protocol didn't just infiltrate the system, it transformed it. The Archean operators received a transmission that was simultaneously a precise mathematical equation, a fragment of human poetry, a quantum mechanical probability analysis, a snippet of a jazz musical composition. Imagine receiving mission-critical information embedded within a remix of Shakespeare, quantum mechanics, and heavy metal lyrics. Computational chaos made manifest. Maria Rodriguez handled the interception and transmission. Her background in cartel communications had taught her something critical about information warfare. True power lies not in destroying communication, but in making it incomprehensible. "Look," she said, pointing to the intercepted Archean logs. "Their entire communication model assumes linear progression. Cause, effect, input, output. But human communication is a quantum state, multiple possibilities existing simultaneously." The Archean communication network began to experience something unprecedented. Computational loops, recursive paradoxes, information that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Amir Khan provided the psychological framework. "We're not just attacking their technology," he explained. "We're attacking their fundamental understanding of communication itself." The breakthrough came when Sarah realized that human creativity was the ultimate computational weapon. The Chimera protocol wasn't just a virus. It was a living, evolving piece of computational art that could reshape itself based on the environment it encountered. Each transmission became a unique fingerprint. No two infiltrations would be the same. The Archean's predictive algorithms became useless against a system that rewrote itself with every interaction. In the underground facility, the team watched as the first large-scale test began. An Archean fleet communication network suddenly found itself receiving transmissions that defied all logical processing. Mathematical proofs that transformed into emotional narratives. Technical specifications that dissolved into abstract art. Strategic coordinates that became recursive poetry. The Archean communication officers began to experience something unprecedented: confusion, doubt. The first stages of what humans would call an existential crisis. Sarah Chen looked at her team and smiled. "We're not just fighting," she said. "We're rewriting the fundamental language of conflict." The technological insurgency had begun. The Archean research station hung in space like a crystalline tumor, a perfect geometric structure that represented the pinnacle of their technological and social engineering. Designation X719, it was more than a research facility. It was a living testament to the Archean belief in absolute control and predictability. Colonel Jack Harker's team was about to make that belief crumble. "This isn't an infiltration," Amir Khan explained, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface that looked more like abstract art than a tactical display. "This is a psychological dissection." The mission was audacious. They would not destroy the station. They would unmake it from the inside out, transforming it into a living nightmare of cognitive dissonance. Maria Rodriguez had spent weeks mapping the station's communication protocols. Each Archean was a product of genetic engineering, bred for a specific purpose, with neural pathways as rigid as their crystalline technology. Communication wasn't just a process for them. It was a biological imperative as structured as their DNA. Derek Wong had prepared their primary weapon, a series of computational packages that looked like standard data transfers, but were actually intricate psychological triggers. Each package was a Trojan horse of human creativity, mathematical equations that dissolved into poetry, technical specifications that transformed into emotional narratives. The first transmission hit the station's primary communication hub like a quantum sledgehammer. Imagine receiving mission-critical information embedded within a remix of human classical music, quantum mechanical probability equations, fragments of philosophical arguments, emotional memory patterns. Researcher X714, designated as a pure analytical unit, was the first to experience the breach. Their neural network, designed for absolute logical processing, encountered something impossible. A transmission that was simultaneously a precise mathematical proof, a fragment of a love poem, a quantum mechanical probability analysis, an emotional memory of loss. The Archon's neural implants began to experience something unprecedented: cognitive dissonance. X714's primary directive had always been simple: analyze, process, optimize. But now, the transmission introduced something fundamentally alien to their understanding: context that couldn't be quantified, emotion that defied logical analysis. We're not just breaking their systems, Amir explained to Harker. We're introducing the concept of uncertainty, of possibility. Deep within the research station, other Archon researchers began to experience similar breaches. Their communication networks, once a perfect crystalline web of logical transmission, started to develop hairline fractures of doubt. Maria watched the transmission patterns with a predator's focus. "Look," she said, pointing to the holographic display. "They're trying to filter our transmissions, but each attempt only creates more complexity." The Chimera protocol wasn't just a virus. It was a living computational organism that evolved with each interaction. Each Archon attempt to understand or block the transmission only made it more complex, more intrusive. Researcher X714 experienced something no Archon had ever experienced before: a moment of true uncertainty, a question that their entire genetic engineering could not answer. What if there was more than one way to understand reality? The psychological warfare wasn't about destruction. It was about introduction, introducing a virus of human complexity into a system built on absolute control. Colonel Harker watched the transmission data with a grim smile. "We're not just fighting," he said. "We're teaching them what it means to be truly alive." In the cold vacuum of space, a crystalline research station began to experience something its designers never intended: doubt, curiosity, the first trembling steps toward understanding that true intelligence isn't about control. It's about adaptation. Humanity's response to the invasion wasn't a traditional military strategy. It was a living, breathing computational organism that defied every known principle of warfare. The human swarm emerged from the most unexpected places: abandoned server farms, underground maker spaces, university research labs, refugee camps. Each location became a node in a global network of resistance that was more organism than organization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in what was once a massive Amazon warehouse, now transformed into the most advanced distributed computing center in human history. Rows of modified servers salvaged from destroyed data centers, consumer electronics, and military-grade hardware created a technological ecosystem that was constantly evolving. "We're not building an army," she told a group of young survivors learning to reprogram captured Archon technology. "We're building a living network that thinks, adapts, and fights." 3D printers became adaptive weapon factories. Every consumer device was a potential tool of resistance. Smartphones transformed into quantum communication nodes. Domestic appliances became components of sophisticated monitoring systems. The line between civilian and military technology disappeared completely. In Detroit, a collective of automotive engineers and computer programmers began converting assembly lines into weapon production facilities. They didn't just manufacture weapons. They created adaptive systems that could modify themselves based on real-time battlefield data. Social media platforms, once dismissed as entertainment, became critical intelligence networks. Every survivor with a working device became a sensor, a potential weapon, a node of collective intelligence. The Archons had a fundamental misunderstanding about human connectivity. They saw networks as rigid structures to be controlled. Humans saw networks as living, breathing ecosystems of shared intelligence. A teenager in Mumbai could discover a vulnerability in Archon communication protocols. Within hours, that information would be analyzed, modified, and distributed globally. A retired engineer in Brazil could design a modification to a captured alien drone. By the next day, That design would be improved upon by thousands of minds working in perfect, chaotic synchronization. Colonel Jack Harker called it the Distributed Warfare Protocol. No central command, no predictable hierarchy, just millions of independently operating cells, each capable of making rapid, creative decisions. An Archon strategic analysis later revealed a terrifying discovery. Humans were evolving their resistance strategy in real time, faster than any known species in galactic history. Sarah Chen's Chimera Protocol had become more than a technological weapon. It was a philosophical virus that infected every aspect of human resistance. Communication became a weapon. Creativity became a defense mechanism. Every limitation was an opportunity for innovation. The global manufacturing infrastructure transformed. Automobile plants produced adaptive drone platforms. Consumer electronics became sophisticated communication nodes. Agricultural facilities developed autonomous defense systems. Derek Wong's team in the underground facility was producing weapons that defied traditional understanding. A device that looked like a consumer drone could suddenly transform into a quantum communication disruptor. A seemingly standard tablet could become a mobile hacking platform capable of penetrating Archon security systems. "We're not trying to match their technology," Derek explained during a strategy session. "We're creating something they can't predict or understand." Technological improvisation as a weapon of war. The Archons began to realize they were fighting something unprecedented. An enemy that didn't just adapt, an enemy that transformed the very concept of adaptation. Maria Rodriguez intercepted a high-level Archon communication that captured their growing panic. The human network, the transmission read, is not a collection of individuals. It is a single, living computational entity. In the ruins of human civilization, something extraordinary was emerging. Not just a resistance, not just a counterattack. A new form of collective intelligence was being born. The first major human counteroffensive was nothing short of tactical poetry. They didn't attack Archon fleet positions. They rewrote the very mathematics of space warfare. The engagement began in the debris field of what was once Jupiter's orbit, a graveyard of human and Archon technology that stretched across millions of kilometers. Colonel Jack Harker's fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A living, breathing computational network of vessels that thought and adapted as a single organism. Captured Archon ships were retrofitted with quantum entanglement drives developed by Dr. Sarah Chen's team. Each vessel became more than a weapon. It was a node in a massive distributed intelligence network that could reconfigure itself faster than any known tracking system could predict. Maria Rodriguez sat at the central computational hub, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that looked more like abstract art than military controls. "They're expecting linear engagement," she muttered. "We're going to give them quantum chaos." The Archon fleet approached with mathematical precision. 12 primary dreadnoughts supported by hundreds of smaller interceptor vessels. Their formation was a perfect geometric pattern, each ship positioned with calculated exactitude. They had conquered hundreds of civilizations using this exact strategy. They had never encountered humans. The first wave of human ships didn't just move. They became a living computational nightmare. Vessels split, merged, and reconfigured in milliseconds. A destroyer would suddenly become 3 separate ships, each operating with a collective intelligence that defied traditional combat algorithms. Holographic decoys mixed with real vessels, creating a battlefield where reality itself became a weapon. Derek Wong's adaptive weapon systems turned each ship into a multi-purpose computational platform. A vessel could transition from a long-range bombardment platform to a close combat interceptor in fractions of a second. Weapon systems rebuilt themselves mid-combat, finding vulnerabilities in real time. Amir Khan's psychological warfare protocols embedded into the ship's communication systems created an additional layer of complexity. Archon tracking systems would receive transmission data that was simultaneously a weapon signature, a mathematical proof, and an emotional narrative. Imagine a military engagement where the very act of observation changed the battlefield. The Archon fleet commanders watched in growing horror as their perfectly calculated battle formations dissolved into computational chaos. Ships that should have been destroyed would suddenly reconstruct themselves. Weapon signatures appeared and disappeared in patterns that violated known physical laws. Sarah Chen's Chimera protocol reached its ultimate expression. Fleet communications became living, breathing entities of pure computational chaos. An Archon fleet commander, designated Strategic Unit Z-902, experienced something unprecedented, a moment of true uncertainty. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. It was thinking, adapting, evolving with each millisecond of engagement. The battle lasted 47 minutes. By its conclusion, 12 Archon dreadnoughts, vessels that had conquered entire civilizations, were reduced to expanding clouds of quantum-dissolved matter. The human cost was remarkably low, not through superior firepower, but through a combat strategy that was part mathematics, part psychological warfare, and part pure human creativity. Colonel Harker watched the tactical display, a grim smile crossing his face. "We're not trying to win a battle," he said to his team. "We're rewriting the fundamental understanding of conflict." The Archons realized, with growing horror, that they were fighting an enemy that didn't just adapt. They transformed the very rules of engagement. Humanity had just demonstrated that the most powerful weapon wasn't technology. It was the capacity to reimagine everything. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity transformed warfare into an art form of pure, unbridled adaptation. What followed was not just a conflict, but a complete reimagining of strategic engagement. Every Archon's strength became a potential weakness. Their rigid hierarchy transformed into a vulnerability that humans would ruthlessly exploit. The Archon Imperium's communication networks, once their greatest asset, became their most critical point of failure. Sarah Chen's team had turned their quantum communication infrastructure into a living, breathing psychological labyrinth. Transmission protocols now carried tactical information, emotional resonance patterns, quantum uncertainty algorithms, philosophical contradictions. Amir Khan developed what the Resistance called cognitive disruptors, transmission packages designed to introduce maximum psychological complexity into Archon decision-making processes. A single transmission could simultaneously contain a precise military strategy, an emotional memory fragment, a mathematical paradox, a piece of human cultural context. Derek Wong's technological innovations turned every captured piece of Archon technology into a weapon of mass psychological deconstruction. Drone systems reprogrammed themselves continuously. Weapon platforms became adaptive computational networks that could redesign themselves mid-combat. Colonel Jack Harker's strategic approach was revolutionary. "We're not fighting to destroy," he explained during a strategic briefing. "We're fighting to transform." The Resistance had become something more than a military force. It was a living, breathing computational organism that could think, adapt, and evolve faster than any known civilization in galactic history. Maria Rodriguez's communication interception network had become so sophisticated that they could predict Archon strategic movements before the Archon commanders themselves understood their own intentions. Their quantum communication analysis could read not just transmission content, but the psychological state of the transmission's creators. On the scientific research front, Dr. Elena Rodriguez led a team that was systematically dismantling Archon technological assumptions. They didn't just reverse engineer Archon technology, they reimagined its fundamental principles. A captured Archon quantum drive became a platform for understanding the very nature of space-time. A communication relay transformed into a research tool that expanded human understanding of quantum mechanics. The Archon leadership began to experience something unprecedented: true uncertainty. Their genetic engineering, designed to create the perfect hierarchy of warriors, became their greatest weakness. Each Archon was bred for a specific purpose, with neural pathways as rigid as their crystalline technology. Humanity's unpredictability became a weapon more devastating than any physical technology. Entire Archean fleet formations found themselves facing engagement scenarios that violated every known principle of strategic warfare. Ships would receive transmission coordinates only to encounter holographic battlefield simulations, quantum-entangled decoy platforms, psychological warfare broadcasts that induced mass computational confusion, and intercepted high-level Archean communication captured their growing panic. The human method of warfare is not a strategy. It is a continuously evolving form of consciousness. The resistance had become a beacon of something far more dangerous than military might, a demonstration of unbridled potential. Colonel Harker stood before a holographic display of current strategic positions, a grim smile crossing his face. "We're not just fighting a war," he told his team. "We're teaching them what it means to be truly alive." In the cold calculus of galactic conflict, humanity had introduced a variable that no civilization had ever encountered: the capacity to transform conflict itself into an act of creative evolution. The aftermath of humanity's resistance was not a simple victory. It was a fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization. The remaining Archean leadership stood before the Galactic Arbitration Council, a collection of civilizations that had watched the conflict with a mixture of terror and fascination. Their crystalline forms, once a symbol of absolute technological superiority, now looked fragile and uncertain. Dr. Sarah Chen approached the council chamber. She was no longer just a scientist. She had become something more, a living symbol of human potential. "We're not here to conquer," she began, her voice carrying the weight of a species that had just rewritten the fundamental understanding of resistance. "We're here to demonstrate a different way of existing." The terms were unprecedented. The Archeans were given a choice: complete integration or total dismantling. Most chose integration, recognizing that the humans had discovered something far more powerful than technological superiority: the ability to constantly reinvent oneself. Archean research facilities were transformed into collaborative exploration centers. Their rigid genetic engineering protocols were systematically dismantled, replaced with a new approach that celebrated diversity and individual potential. Colonel Jack Harker oversaw the initial integration. The military strategists who had once planned total eradication now became teachers of a new paradigm. They showed the Archeans something they had never understood: strength comes from adaptation, not control. Maria Rodriguez led the communication integration teams. Archean communication networks were rebuilt from the ground up, introducing concepts of emotional intelligence, contextual understanding, and creative interpretation. What was once a perfect, rigid system became a living, breathing network of possibility. Derek Wong's technological teams worked alongside Archean engineers, demonstrating how innovation comes from unexpected connections. Consumer technologies were reimagined. Military platforms became platforms for exploration and understanding. The galaxy watched in astonishment. Civilizations that had long been suppressed by the Archean Imperium began to emerge. Each found in humanity an unexpected ally, not a conqueror, but a catalyst for transformation. Amir Khan developed what became known as the Adaptive Civilization Protocols, a set of guidelines that celebrated cognitive diversity. These protocols would reshape how intelligent species understood themselves and each other. Scientific breakthroughs emerged at an unprecedented rate. The combination of Archean technological precision and human creative thinking produced innovations that transformed multiple fields: quantum communication technologies, adaptive medical treatments, interstellar exploration methodologies, computational systems that could learn and evolve. The Archeans discovered something truly terrifying. Their perceived weakness was actually their greatest potential: individual thought, emotional complexity, the capacity to reimagine oneself continuously. Sarah Chen delivered the final address to the Galactic Arbitration Council. Her words would be remembered for generations. "We are not defined by our technology. We are defined by our capacity to transform. Every limitation is an opportunity. Every challenge is a chance to become something new." The remaining Archean leadership, once the most rigid and controlled species in the galaxy, began to experience something unprecedented: hope, the possibility of becoming more than their original programming. Humanity had done more than win a war. They had introduced a new way of understanding existence itself. In the vast, cold mathematics of the universe, a simple truth emerged. The most powerful force is not technology. It is the ability to reimagine what's possible.